How did this 98-year-old grandmother, living completely alone through the longest and most thermally severe sub-zero winter on recorded meteorological record in the entire region, without electricity, running water, power tools, veterinary support, commercial building materials, structural guidance of any kind, or any form of outside assistance from any person, organization, or institution anywhere, design from scratch, calculate every structural load and thermal variable, entirely by hand, and physically construct over the course of a single brutal and unrelenting winter season, using only raw timber. She personally felled and notched with a single worn hand axe. Animal hide. She cured, stretched, and sealed alone. Over open frozen ground, subcutaneous fat. She rendered over an open flame and below freezing ambient air. Compressed lichen and moss. She harvested by hand from beneath the active permafrost surface, and pre-war construction principles preserved entirely in pure oral memory, passed down through 4 consecutive living generations of cold climate survival knowledge. A fully functional, multi-chamber, passively heated, thermodynamically self-sustaining emergency animal shelter, engineered to maintain biologically survivable interior core temperatures. During sustained ambient outdoor conditions of -80 degrees Celsius, a structure built, not to house herself, not to protect her own provisions, and not to fulfill any legal or institutional obligation of any kind, but exclusively and entirely without compensation of any form to house, warm from the inside out, medically stabilize, behaviorally rehabilitate, and provide caloric-dense species-appropriate emergency nutrition to the stray, injured, disoriented, abandoned, and severely frostbitten animals that arrive at her perimeter, night after night, through weather that strips core, body heat, from an unprotected human in under 6 minutes. Animals that no municipal animal shelter, no regional wildlife rescue organization, no government conservation program, no funded animal welfare initiative, and no single credentialed professional of any discipline has ever dispatched even one representative to assist, acknowledge, or document. A structure incorporating a geodesic-influenced asymmetric roof load. Distribution framework. A fully passive radiant heat circulation chamber requiring 0 external fuel input after initial thermal mass saturation is fully achieved and stabilized. A permafrost, frost heave anchored foundation that has now completed 3 full seasonal cycles of active ground movement. Without a single measurable structural compromise, a multi-layer tensile strength hide and compressed moss wall assembly with thermal resistance performance independently measured to surpass commercial insulation products, evaluated at identical temperature thresholds, and a perimeter behavioral predator buffer zone, constructed entirely from 70 years of direct observational knowledge of every regional apex predator's territorial movement and structural intrusion decision pattern, while Arctic thermal engineers, cold climate veterinary researchers, off-grid survival architects, applied animal behavioral biologists, former polar expedition infrastructure teams, environmental passive design professors, and international humanitarian aid organizations in active sub-zero field operations are now all formally studying her structure as the most thermally efficient, predator-resistant, caloric density optimized, and multi-species compatible emergency animal shelter ever informally built and continuously operated in the documented history of cold climate survival engineering, proving that compassion at -80 degrees Celsius is not a feeling, not a social media post, and not a fundraising campaign. It is a precision structural and thermal engineering problem requiring exact and tested solutions, and that the only person who has fully and correctly solved it did so alone and from pure unaided memory, without a single academic credential or dollar of institutional funding, using only what the frozen ground around her was willing to surrender. Because she already understood the thermodynamics of radiant heat loss through green timber, the structural integrity requirements of any shelter under extreme sustained thermal load, the precise caloric needs of a hypothermic body rebuilding core temperature in passive radiant heat, and the behavioral psychology of frightened and frostbitten animals, approaching an unknown structure in total darkness at -80 degrees, more completely, more precisely, and more compassionately than every funded research program, every published cold climate veterinary protocol, every government animal welfare infrastructure standard, and every peer-reviewed paper on sub-zero biological survival that has ever been written, approved, and filed away in a cabinet that no freezing stray animal has ever had the warmth or the time to wait for.